On Culinary Journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine. And in an industry where men dominate, see how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds, and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
I'm Matthew Chance in Kiev, and this is CNN.
In favour of having confidence in Boris Johnson as leader was 211 votes, and the vote against was 148 votes. And therefore, I can announce that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
Well, Boris Johnson still leads the United Kingdom, but for how long? This hour, the latest on the drama at Westminster. And inside Mariupol, there are fears of a cholera outbreak, adding to the misery in the devastated city in southern Ukraine. Plus,
maybe it's easier not to listen to the truth, the ambassador.
well, an undiplomatic spat at the United Nations over the global food crisis. This hour, a CNN report on how Turkey plans to ease the pain. Becky Anderson in London. Hello and welcome to Connect World. Well, he still calls 10 Downing Street home. But Britain's Boris Johnson is a Prime Minister in survival mode. He squeaked through Monday's confidence vote. 41% of UK lawmakers from his own party, the Conservatives, had tried to oust him. An astonishing outcome for his detractors, especially when you consider that just over 2 years ago, Mr. Johnson claimed a landslide general election victory. So, is this a leadership departure delayed, not prevented? After all, this is a bigger Tory rebellion than the ones faced by his predecessors, Margaret Thatcher, John Major and Theresa May. Well, a short time ago, the Prime Minister told a cabinet meeting to find ways to bring down Britain's high cost of living. Just hours after Mr. Johnson had tried to put a brave face on Monday night's vote. Have a listen.
Of course, I understand that what we need to do now is come together as a government, as a party, and that is exactly what we can now do. And what this gives us is the opportunity to put behind us all the stuff that I know the media have quite properly wanted to focus on for a very long time, and to do our job, which is to focus on the stuff that I think the public actually want us to be talking about, which is what we are doing to help the people of this country and all the things we're doing to take this country forward. Well,
we're live in Downing Street for you, where CNN's Phil Black is standing by for us. What this gives us is the opportunity to put behind us what the media have wanted to focus on, he said, and instead address the issues that the British public want addressed. Not even his own party members believe that he is able to do that. 41% of them voted against him in a vote of no confidence yesterday. And yet, you know, he remains as Prime Minister. So is this a leader who can get things done, as he says he wants to do for the British public?
Well, that's his message today, Becky. That is the message of his supporters. That is what he told his cabinet when he met them here earlier today. The only message coming from Johnson, Downing Street and his supporters is that this has been dealt with, that a line has been drawn, that he now once again has a mandate to govern, to get on with the things that British people care about, in his words. That is no doubt what he hopes that he will be able to do, set about focusing on policy, making real achievements, building up a reputation for effectiveness and then taking that through to the next general election. But the reality is, as you say, he cannot feel confident about being able to do that. He doesn't know that this is how that's going to play out, and that is because of that 41% or so figure, that number significant number of people within the Parliamentary Conservative Party who have declared their very strong desire that he should no longer be the leader of the party or the Prime Minister of this country. It is a bigger figure than many expected, and it is a figure backed up by significant feeling, because what those people are also voting for was significant uncertainty, a long, messy leadership contest, not knowing what would come at the end of that. But so strong was the feeling in the desire to get rid of Boris Johnson that they were prepared to take that risk, either on a point of principle or either because they have lost hope and faith in Johnson's ability to ensure that they each win, hold on to their seats at the next election. Johnson's supporters would also say that many of those people who voted against him are people who never liked him, or people whose careers have suffered or not progressed under his leadership of the party. Becky.
Phil Black is outside number 10, where the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is still in residence, for the time being at least. Thank you. Well, the vote last night was a distinctly Conservative affair, but Labour MP Tamanjeed Tedeschi is weighing in. Before the vote, he tweeted, "Conservatives need to develop some moral backbone and do the right thing, remove Boris Johnson and reintroduce standards and values back into the now degraded office of Prime Minister. Tory sleaze," he says, "has no place in our government or in our democracy." Well, the MP is joining me now live. Sir, thanks for joining us. A party divided, a nationally unpopular leader. You would expect this to be a victory for your party, the Labour Party in opposition. No sign of that as of yet, though, because this is a man who is still standing. So what do you make of what happened on Monday?
Well, Becky, I very much see this as a farcical and a highly unacceptable situation. As you rightly said, what I wanted, and I think the country wanted, was the Conservative MPs to develop that moral backbone and overcome the alleged bullying and blackmailing and vote out this incompetent, lying Prime Minister. Instead, we now have a situation where, in essence, we've got a death by 1,000 cuts, a dead man walking, in essence, and a government of the walking wounded. They will not be able to deal with the major issues of the time, whether it's tackling the climate crisis, whether it's tackling the cost of living crisis. In fact, over the last 5 months, while they did not put in a windfall tax, there was per day a £50 million increase in terms of the bills of British working people. And I think what needs to happen is that the government needs to be focused, rather than saving the Prime Minister every single day, they need to be focused on the job at hand.
Well, he says he is.
Becky,
Let me stop you there. He says he is. He says at his cabinet meeting today, he said we need to focus on addressing the issues of the day, that being the extremely high cost of living at present. I want to take a listen to your party leader for a moment, Keir Starmer. This was his response to what happened last night.
The British public are fed up with a Prime Minister who promises big but never delivers. Fed up with a Prime Minister who's presided over a culture of lies and law-breaking at the heart of government. Fed up with a Prime Minister who is utterly unfit for the great office that he holds. Conservative MPs made their choice tonight. They have ignored the British public.
Question is, what does your party do about this, sir?
Yeah, well, look, Becky, what we have been calling for months now is for the Prime Minister to go, because not only do we have the issue of misleading Parliament, misleading the British public, and running roughshod over the ministerial code, we've also had issues regarding corruption in the handing out of crony COVID contracts to Tory donors. We had the whole Owen Paterson saga and how the Prime Minister tried to save Owen Paterson and his cronies from that. And that's what needed to happen. Unfortunately, although the vast majority of the British public, and according to opinion polls, the majority of the British public wanted the Prime Minister to resign, unfortunately, only just over 41% of Conservative MPs felt that way. Now, what that's meant is that the Prime Minister no longer holds the confidence of approximately 3/4 of his own backbenchers. Once we take out the paid ministerial roles of approximately 160...
I understand that. Can I just press you on this next point, though, because I think we're going over what happened last night, which is understandable. I guess what I want to get from you is whether or not Mr. Johnson steps down, and at this point he's going nowhere. Britons are, it seems, simply not convinced that Labour, your party, are ready to lead. Has Mr. Starmer shown any proof to the contrary? I mean, he's accused the Prime Minister of lying over the Partygate scandal, and yet he is now being questioned by police over possible COVID rule breaches too. He promised he would stand down if fined. Would that actually be the right thing for the party at this point? And if so, who should take the party on? Because the Labour Party needs to act at this point, doesn't it?
Well, Becky, I think Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has acted with a great deal of integrity and honesty. The incident to which you're referring, that has already been investigated once by the police, and they have concluded categorically that there was no rule breaking. But pending this investigation, I think also, once again, Keir has done the right thing to say if any wrongdoing is proved, if there is a fine, that unlike the Prime Minister, he would actually resign on a point of principle, because we need to reinstill honesty, integrity and principles within our polity. We cannot have this continual pathological lying going on, wherein we then are the bane of a lot of the ills within our society, and we cannot then go on the world stage and preach to others about values, about the rule of law, if our own Prime Minister is not respecting that. And I think that,
or indeed
as far as the Labour Party is
leader of the
concerned,
opposition.
The leader of the opposition, I think, has already been very, very good in terms of the way that he has conducted himself. But what we need to know in terms of the Labour Party's positioning is, if opinion polls are to be believed, then we are ahead on all of the opinion polls. So if there was an election tomorrow, then Labour would be victorious. But we cannot be complacent. We have to make sure that we have a policy platform put out to the British public, and especially the hard-working Brits, that they can realise that Labour is now ready for government.
Mr. Johnson does have a mandate from the British public, and now the ruling Conservative Party, of course, as well. Despite there being a significant number of detractors, they will say it's time to get on with policy making and wait until the next general election. I'm sure you are telling me that the Labour Party will work very hard towards that point as well. Thank you, sir. We're going to Ukraine now, and an uncertain path forward in the battle for Severodonetsk. A Ukrainian military official in the city reports the situation is changing every hour, with fierce battles and street fights going on today. Ukraine's president says more than 2,500 soldiers who left the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol may now be held in Russian-occupied areas of the Donbass. Volodymyr Zelensky voicing uncertainty about what will happen to them, saying Russia's plans are constantly changing. Well, inside Mariupol, an advisor to the mayor there says Russia is quietly closing the city amid fears of a cholera outbreak. He says corpses are piled everywhere. Ben Wiedemann connecting us from Kramatorsk in the Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine. The battle rages in Severodonetsk. This battle seems to be somewhat stuck in the mud, as it were. We are hearing reports of fierce street fighting, and then, of course, the reports out of Mariupol. Where do you want to start today?
Well, let's first talk about Severodonetsk, where the head of the military administration in that city says that the situation there is consistently difficult. He said that Russian forces are basically throwing everything they have into the battle, where there are intense street fights. And on top of that, making the situation ever more complicated, is that there are between 10 and 11,000 civilians stuck in the middle, hiding in basements and bomb shelters, and given the intensity of the fighting, they have no way of getting out at the moment. Now, as far as the situation in Mariupol, it's grave, even though the actual fighting there ended quite a long time ago, several weeks ago. But we see that the trauma from that 2-month siege that ended with an agreement between the Russians and the Ukrainians still goes on, as you will see in this report we're about to show you. But we must warn viewers that some of the images they're about to see may be disturbing. And so begins on a sunny summer morning the grimmest of tasks. Workers at Kyiv's central morgue examine the contents of 160 dirty, putrid body bags. containing the badly decomposed remains of soldiers killed during the 2-month siege of the port city of Mariupol, and in the city's sprawling Azovstal steel plant, where Ukrainian forces made their last stand. Ukraine and Russia have conducted an exchange of bodies as part of the agreement that ended the siege. Forensic examiner Lilia Filipchuk has been on the job for 3 years. Since the war began, she's had little rest. We also examined the bodies from Bucha and Irpin, she says, referring to Kyiv suburbs where retreating Russian forces are accused of committing atrocities against civilians. Elena Tolkachova is also helping. She's affiliated with the Azov Brigade, which fought in Mariupol. The brigade is a nationalist militia that was integrated into Ukraine's armed forces. The morgue is already full of bodies from Kyiv, from Bucha, from Irpin, she says. So we have to put them in a refrigerator truck. Morgue workers search the ripped and ragged clothing for documents and tag and bag personal items. This is just the start of a long process. Some of these bodies have no identification, so their DNA will have to be sampled. And it may take a month, maybe more, to find out who they were. And only then will their loved ones know their fate. Finality for the living and the dead will have to wait. And indeed, that finality may not come for a while. We understand that out of the 160 body bags, only 8 of those bodies have been positively identified. Becky?
Ben Wiedemann on the story for you. Thank you, Ben. Well, the UN's nuclear watchdog has declined to comment on accusations from Ukraine that the head of the organisation was, and I quote here, lying about being invited to visit an occupied nuclear plant. On Monday, International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi tweeted, and I quote, "We're working to send an expert mission to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine requested us. We will go there." But Ukraine's nuclear energy operator denies that there was any such invitation, and it has accused Grossi of legitimizing Russia's occupation of the plant and said a visit would only be possible once Ukraine regains control over it. Well, I will speak to the head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, next hour about that and about concerns over Iran's nuclear program. Well, accusations grow louder against Russia's other weapon in Ukraine, which is food. We'll take a look at efforts to unblock Ukrainian grain and get it to developing countries who desperately need it. And 2 businessman brothers have been arrested in Dubai. More on the charges levied against them and the international calls for their arrests.
Connecting Africa in association with Afreximbank.
Opay is Nigeria's foremost financial inclusion service provider. Everywhere in Nigeria today, even in the remotest part of Nigeria, we have a large agency banking business with more than 500,000 agents across Nigeria. But we're also the last mile in terms of access to financial services for more than 10 million Nigerians, many of which do not have any form of bank account through the Opay digital wallet. We go to where banks cannot go to. We are much more nimble. We are more tech-oriented. Therefore, we can deploy in a more agile way and get to reach far many more areas. That is where you find Opay. The excluded in Nigeria will be truly brought into the formal financial services, and that's our mission.
Connecting Africa in association with Afreximbank.
We share this place, we all belong. We have to restore this planet's soul. Give it water, give it sun, room to grow. I can see a better tomorrow. I can see a better tomorrow.
brothers, wanted by Interpol, have been arrested in the UAE. Indian-born businessman Atul Gupta, seen here, and his brother Rajesh are accused of corruption in South Africa under former President Jacob Zuma. Now, both the Guptas and the former president deny any wrongdoing. CNN's Eleni Giokos has more details for us from Dubai. And just remind us who these two men are, what sort of power they wielded in the years-long scandal, Eleni, that has led us to this point.
Yeah, it's been an unbelievable journey, I have to say, Becky. Look, we're talking about 9 years of alleged corruption, money laundering and fraud that was all under the oversight of former President Jacob Zuma. Now, the Gupta brothers had a vast network of influence within the government that went right to the top. And it was very few sectors or departments within government that they didn't touch. They were getting tenders, whether it was healthcare or within state-owned enterprises or whether it was within power utilities or locomotives. And their influence was so incredible that you actually saw it was brazen. The corruption that was happening was in plain sight. The public protector at that time had put through an investigation that lasted over 4 years. Incredible witnesses that came to the fore over that time, Becky, that gave overwhelming evidence of their influence. The Gupta brothers at that time refused to appear in front of the Commission of Inquiry. Jacob Zuma also at the time refused to appear in front of the Commission of Inquiry, but there were so many incidents. For example, when the respected finance minister at the time was replaced by an unknown person, the markets then crashed, and then they had to backtrack on that decision. The Commission of Inquiry revealed that the Gupta brothers had enormous influence, that they were able to, make or break cabinet ministers' careers or put people in positions of power in order to get deals and contracts signed at that time.
So the UAE has arrested these brothers. It is, as they say, in response to an international request. How does this extradition process then work?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. We've just had news out that they were arrested on the 2nd of June. We spoke to a legal consultant a short while ago that within 48 hours of arrest, they need to see a criminal prosecutor. That is their right. They would then be requested whether they wanted to actually be extradited. As anticipated, they probably said no to that. Within 72 hours, they would be able to apply for bail. We have no news on that right now, but given it's been, almost 5 or 6 days since they were arrested, one would assume that would have movement on that. But whether they would be extradited is a complex process. The National Prosecuting Authority in South Africa says that they're working with the UAE government to try and find a way forward. But now we know that they have to put through the file, the actual charges. And then if, again, the Gupta brothers refuse to be extradited, they would appear in court in front of 3 judges here in Dubai that would then make the decision on being extradited. The legal consultant, I have to say, said it's pretty simple. The defense would probably be focusing on saying that this is politically motivated, something that the Gupta brothers, Becky, have been talking about for many years now. But also it's important to note that the South African population, just South Africans generally, are feeling that the Gupta brothers got away with so much graft over almost 10 years, where again the Commission of Inquiry had proved much of that, and then were able to leave South Africa shortly after Jacob Zuma resigned and came to live here in Dubai, basically untouched and without accountability. So the National Prosecuting Authority has a really big task to try and ensure that there is some kind of recourse on what we saw playing out in the country for over 10 years.
Eleni Giokos is in Dubai. Thanks, Eleni. Well, controversial comments made by 2 officials with India's ruling party are pushing the government there into full damage control with Arab nations. The ruling BJP has suspended spokeswoman Nupur Sharma for comments about the Prophet Muhammad that were considered offensive and Islamophobic. Now, Sharma has since withdrawn her statement, but that didn't stop at least 14 countries from condemning her words. In retaliation, shops in Kuwait were seen removing Indian products from the shelves. Well, CNN's Vidika Sood joining me live from New Delhi with more. This has been a couple of days now, and we are continuing to see what feels like an escalation here. Is there a risk of a full-blown boycott of India by Gulf nations specifically. What's going on here?
Good to be with you, Becky. I don't think the Indian government will let it get to that point, Becky. If what's happening in Kuwait is something to go by, this is where the Indian government will go into an overdrive, into damage control mode, and try to placate the emotions of the Gulf nations. Now, this is the reason behind it. We know disciplinary action has been taken against the two officials from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party, the Bharatiya Janata Party. A lot of people see this as a political move. I see it as an economic move. And here's why. India highly depends on these Gulf nations for a lot of things, including energy imports. Now, when it comes to India, India is the third highest importer of oil, and a bulk of the crude imports come from the Middle East. And that's why they cannot risk upsetting the Gulf nations as well. Also, what we have to understand here is millions of Indians live and work in the Gulf nations, and they send back billions of dollars in remittances. UAE, as you would know, Becky, and India have signed a free trade agreement. So at this point, India cannot risk upsetting these countries, and that's why they're on this overdrive to make sure that they reach out to these countries. They've been on this overdrive when it comes to India's foreign ministry to even respond to statements issued by these countries, and they've been very clear about keeping a huge distance from the Bharatiya Janata Party, from its members. They've gone on record to say that these statements that have been issued and that have been uttered by these members of the BJP are fringe elements. These are individuals and do not reflect the views of the Indian government. And that's exactly what they need to drive home, this point, not only within India, but overseas as well, because this is the only way they can actually bring back a balance when it comes to their relations with the Gulf nations at this point. And that's the concern they have currently, Becky.
Vedika Sood on the story. Thank you. Well, do not enter. Moscow adds more names to an already long list of Americans banned from entering Russia. And the names include some top government and business leaders that you will recognize. Dozens of countries rely on Ukrainian grain, of course, but exports have trickled to snail's pace since the Russian invasion. We'll take a look at the efforts to get it to those who desperately need it.
Mainland China tolerates no signs of dissent whatsoever.
Are you anticipating dozens of people being prosecuted? Hundreds? Thousands?
Stories of mass internment camps have been trickling out.
Do you think you'll see your husband again?
This period of mourning is taking place in a real climate of fear. The humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of our eyes here.
This is one of the cells? Come on in here.
We're flying over ISIS front lines. This is the only protection we have. Nerves are still very much on edge. Firefighters have been battling this blaze for weeks.
What do you say to people who question climate change?
We need to do something now.
Ivan Watson, CNN.
My name's Jim Brailsford, and I lead the Industry and Solutions Marketing team for Kinaxis. It's absolutely key that businesses incorporate sustainability into their business models. Firstly, you have got the corporate objective and being a good global citizen. You've also got the need to be reflecting that to your public, to your consumers, that show that you are actually being environmentally conscious. And also, as supply chains are more mature and are considering all of these things in a holistic way, it develops a sort of a steadiness to their operation. Supply chain sustainability will become a qualifier. It will not necessarily be the winner, but it'll become a qualifier enabling you to participate in the competition.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Welcome back. I'm Becky Anderson in London. You're watching Connect the World. Russia placing sanctions on 61 more Americans, banning them from entering the country. The Kremlin blaming them for involvement in what it calls fake reports about Russian cyber attacks. Amongst those on Moscow's so-called stop list are media execs, heads of shipbuilding and aircraft companies, and a slew of US State Department military and other officials, including Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Yellen joins US President Joe Biden and more than 900 other individuals who were placed on the list last month. Claire Sebastian covering the story for us from London. Is there any rhyme or reason to these latest names?
I mean, I think the action in itself is largely symbolic. Obviously, when it comes to travel bans and, I mean, asset freezes don't really work for Russia because no one keeps their assets inside Russia. It just doesn't have the kind of leverage that the West has over Russian individuals. And so you see them publishing these lists. They published a list back in May of 963 Americans on the so-called stop list, banned from entering in Russia. Among those were, you know, people no longer alive, like John McCain. Our own Nick Payton-Walsh was on the list. He's actually not American. And here there's you know, very big variety of names. You've got the likes of Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines, CEO of Fitch Group, the founder and CEO of Netflix is on there as well, along with the CEO of the NASDAQ, a slew of presidential advisors. It's not exactly clear the sort of theme that they're going for. I think there's, and obviously high-ranking officials like Janet Yellen.
The overriding theme will be certainly on the corporate side, those who have actually been relatively vocal about the sanctions on Russia and pulling their business from Russia, and the likes of Netflix, for example. You can see why perhaps that is. The US action is also, the US, of course, has taken action itself. Again, two private planes, as I understand it, owned by the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich. Why, Claire? Is it clear?
So this is enforcement of existing sanctions. This is the US trying to show that they're not just about sort of, you know, putting in these sanctions, they actually want to enforce them as well. What they have is a warrant to seize these two planes. They're worth more than 400 million. It's one Gulfstream jet, which is said to be inside Russia at the moment, and one 787 Dreamliner said to be worth $350 million. That is apparently in Dubai now. They haven't actually seized these planes yet. Obviously, they can't seize the one that's inside Russia. It's unlikely they'll get the Corporation of Dubai to seize the one inside Dubai. So obviously, they have to wait, essentially, until one of these planes moves into a jurisdiction that's friendly to the US. But they've done this in a very transparent way. They've published an affidavit that names shell companies that apparently Roman Abramovich used to sort of obfuscate his involvement, his ownership with these planes. There was a diagram even sort of detailing the different shell companies and how they're linked to these planes. And that is part of the strategy here, to show the world that the US is enforcing this, to try to bring in other jurisdictions to join them, and essentially a deterrent to others from doing the same.
Fascinating. Thank you. Claire Sebastian in the house for you. Well, the President of the European Council says Russia is using more than just bombs and bullets to fight Ukraine. It is using food. His comments came Monday during a meeting of the United Nations Security Council. Now, this war has left food stuck at Ukrainian ports and kept farmers from harvesting what they have tried to grow. Charles Michel accused Russia of fueling the food crisis and addressed his criticism to its UN ambassador directly, prompting him to storm out of the meeting.
Mr. Ambassador of the Russian Federation, let's be honest. The Kremlin is using food supplies as a stealth missile against developing countries. The dramatic consequences of Russia's war are spilling over across the globe, and this is driving up food prices, pushing people into poverty and destabilizing entire regions.
Well, some world leaders are scrambling to try to end the food crisis. The UN Secretary General trying to broker a deal, while the Russian Foreign Minister is due in Turkey on Wednesday to work on what he says is getting Ukraine's grain exports flowing again. Jumaal Karachi has more for you now from Istanbul.
From his Istanbul terrace, Yuruk Ishuk has watched part of Russia's invasion of Ukraine play out in Turkey's Bosphorus Strait. First, it was the military buildup. Now the ship watcher and founder of the Bosphorus Observer has been documenting Russia's theft of Ukrainian grain. With the help of satellite images and Ukrainian activists, he tracked and filmed this Russian ship transiting the Bosphorus. The ship appeared in Maxar Technologies images obtained by CNN last month. It was smuggling stolen Ukrainian wheat.
This is a bottleneck spot, and there aren't so many spots like this. This easy to monitor. We almost miss nothing coming out of Black Sea from here. Only in last 2-3 weeks, we witnessed at least 10 journeys of 10 different ships carried wheat from occupied Ukrainian ports into mostly to Syria. Because people are worried about the sanctions, etc., they are usually carrying first to Syria, and it's getting distributed to the other Middle Eastern customers from Syria so far.
Turkey's straits are governed by the 1936 Montreux Convention. It's already restricted access to Russian naval vessels under that agreement, but when it comes to commercial traffic, it's limited in what it can do. But Russia is not only accused of theft. Ukraine, the US, and the EU have all accused it of holding the world to ransom, blockading Ukrainian ports and stopping the export of more than 20 million tons of Ukrainian grain that dozens of countries rely on. Russia blames Ukraine for the blockade and says it's Western sanctions that are causing a global food crisis.
Turkey's trying to use its strategic location and its close ties with both its Black Sea neighbors, Russia and Ukraine, to try and broker a deal that would establish a sea corridor for Ukrainian grain exports.
That potential grain corridor through the Turkish Straits will top the agenda when the Russian foreign minister meets his Turkish counterpart on Wednesday, a meeting Turkish officials are hoping will lay the groundwork for talks soon between Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations.
Turkey can definitely provide service as an auditor to make sure that grain is being sent out from both Ukraine and Russia. Being one of the Black Sea powers, it has the capacity to provide security inside the Black Sea as well. So it can be a player that provides security, that provides observation, provides auditing that could be acceptable and considered legitimate by both Kiev and Moscow.
But the Russians will have their own demands, likely unacceptable to Western powers. They've already indicated they want sanctions lifted.
I expect the Russians to want a waiver on their grain sales as well, and they feel that they have the leverage right now. Turkey is going to be very important in being able to negotiate between Russia and the West to be able to get a sanctions waiver for the Russians for their grain sales as well.
When few will trust what Russia promises, there's no easy path out of this. But Turkey's hoping it can at least begin the complex process of trying to end the blockade and avert a crisis the UN has warned will lead to famine and instability around the world. Jumana Karache, CNN, Istanbul.
Let's get you up to speed on some of the other stories that are on our radar elsewhere in the Middle East. And a new report from a US government watchdog on Afghanistan says when former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani fled the country, it is not likely he took millions of dollars with him. The interim findings contradict allegations that Ghani took cash that was reported missing from the presidential palace and other government vaults. A 66-year-old British geologist has been sentenced to 15 years in an Iraqi prison after being convicted of stealing artifacts. Jim Fitton's family said he was touring an ancient city where he picked up 12 fragments. Fitton's lawyer says he didn't know what they were, but they were later determined to be artifacts. There's also concern about this British citizen, a journalist as well as a Brazilian indigenous expert. Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira have gone missing in the Brazilian Amazon. Authorities and indigenous rights groups said the two had gotten death threats. The Amazon military command has begun a search operation for them. Well, golf's newest series may be its most exciting, but it's also the most controversial. We've got new developments involving two top golfers coming up.
Back in person, the 2022 Afreximbank annual meetings will bring together high-profile continental and global leaders to harness and leverage Africa's incredible potential. Register now.
Our mission here at CNN and journalists, the news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster.
More breaking news that we are following right now.
You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts.
We're learning more about our life plot.
It is critically important.
To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the situation where we have breaking news.
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smirconish, Saturday on CNN.
The inaugural event for the controversial Live Golf series starts on Thursday near London. The Saudi-backed tour has caused a bit of a stir in the golf world. The PGA Tour has threatened disciplinary action against any of its golfers who play in these tournaments. Well, that's OK by golfer Dustin Johnson. He just quit the PGA tournament to play in this new series. Then there's 6-time major champ Phil Mickelson. He'll too be teeing off just months after criticising the Saudi regime. After a backlash, Mickelson took some time away from golf, then on Monday wrote this on Twitter. I want to again apologise to the many people I offended and hurt with my comments a few months ago. I've made mistakes in my career in some of the things I have said and done, and I have been engaged and intentional in continued therapy and feel more healthy and much more at peace. I realise I still have a long way to go, but I am embracing the work ahead. Coy Wire joins us now with a closer look at the tournament and these new developments. Let's start with Phil Mickelson and that tweet. That was it was quite in depth. What's he trying to get at here?
Well, he had a lot to walk back, right, Becky? I mean, he was very critical of his comments that came out some months ago about Saudi Arabia and their human rights track record over the years, and now here he was deciding to play in this new tournament. And he's not the only one. As you mentioned, Dustin Johnson resigning from the PGA Tour just this day, joining Kevin Na, another player that decided to leave the PGA Tour in pursuit of this lucrative new league. We're going to talk a lot about that in the upcoming World Sport. And we will also have Minjee Lee, the U.S. Women's Open champion, newly minted. She'll be joining the show.
Super. Coy, thank you for that. Coy Wire's up next with World Sport. We'll be back top of the hour for you. Stay with
us. June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Breaking news just hours ago, former world #1 and 2-time major champion Dustin Johnson has resigned from the PGA Tour, making the announcement just outside of London at the venue for the first ever Saudi-backed Live Golf Tour, which tees off on Thursday. Johnson follows fellow American Kevin Na in quitting the PGA Tour to pursue this highly lucrative new league. And Monday, Phil Mickelson committing to play in the inaugural Live Golf event as well. This will be the first time we've seen Mickelson since January. He lost several sponsors, took some time away after making disparaging comments about Saudi Arabia's human rights record and the new golf tour it's backing. Here's Dustin Johnson making the big announcement to leave the PGA Tour earlier Tuesday.
Obviously, at this time, it's hard to speak on what the consequences will be. But for right now, I resign my membership from the tour. I'm going to play here, for now, and that's the plan. But what the consequences are going to be, I can't comment on how the tour is going to handle. Again, I can't answer for the majors, but hopefully they're going to allow us to play. Obviously, I'm exempt for the majors, so. I plan on playing there, unless I hear otherwise.
Now, earlier, our Amanda Davis and Alex Thomas discussed what type of further impact this new league may have on the PGA Tour, which has stated that there will be disciplinary action taken against any player who chooses to play in the new breakaway league.
Have the DP World Tour, the former European Tour, the PGA Tour, are they right to be as worried as they seemingly are?
They absolutely should be.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an absolute game changer, and that's the phrase that Greg Norman, the Live Golf CEO, used. Norman's claimed that it's a game changer more for the players actually ranked lower down, that he thinks the golfing money at the moment is focused too much on the top of the field, whereas this is offering riches beyond players' dreams, even when they've got no chance of necessarily winning the tournaments. So that's an interesting approach. Certainly with Johnson and Mickelson on board, if legal challenges are overcome, and if other players see that they're enjoying their lifestyle. Tellingly, Johnson said, I don't want to be playing golf for the rest of my life. We think if you've earned more than $70 million, surely you won't have to anyway. But I think he feels he can get maybe a few years, mega payday, and that's it. Just live in absolute luxury for the rest of his life for him and his family. And I think others could well come around to that way of thinking as well.
Do you think, though, these threats will be carried out? I mean, the idea, there's one thing, players not being able to take part in the PGA Tour, the regular season events. The idea that these players can't take part in the Ryder Cup, that's something completely different, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, if you resign the membership, then that's part of the rules that are already there. And this scenario was never envisioned. What will be interesting is next week's US Open, the second major of the men's season. It's at Brookline Country Club just outside Boston. The four majors, a bit like in tennis, are kind of organised differently to the regular tours. So it'll be interesting to see if they stick their necks out and try and back the PGA and DP World Tours and try and ban these players. There's no suggestion of that yet. And someone like Rory McIlroy said it would be wrong to punish these players who've gone to Live Golf too much.
We will continue to follow this story. Our Alex Thomas will be there following the inaugural event. Now, more big news in the golf world this week. History made when Australian Minjee Lee won the 77th U.S. Women's Open in Southern Pines, North Carolina on Sunday. The 26-year-old won the largest payout in women's golf history, $1.8 million. So, not only was this a champagne shower victory, a celebration of Minjee's second major title of her career, it was also celebrating a step in the right direction for women's golf. Joining us now, I'm happy to say, the Minjee Lee. Minjee, congratulations, first of all, and thank you for joining us on World Sport. We see you celebrating so much joy, so much champagne. What was going through your mind when you realized that you were about to win it?
I mean, just walking down that 18th hole, I think that was such a special moment for me, just looking at all the crowd and, just looking at the finish line. I think it was just a really special moment. And I was nervous as hell, but it was pretty cool.
A long time coming. You learned golf at a young age, right?
Yeah.
Your mom was teaching a teaching pro at a driving range back in Australia. What has your family meant to you on this journey?
I mean, they've been with me every step of the way, and I've only always got encouragement from them. So if I wanted to practice, I could go practice. If I didn't, then I didn't have to. So I think they've just always been a great support and still am. And it's just been a really great journey so far.
I love that your brother, also a pro golfer, he called you. He said if your trajectory in life is a straight line, he's more of a squiggly line. You're going to have some bragging rights over him around the holiday table. Now, you've gone from being a U.S. Girls Junior champion to now a two-time major champ. What message do you hope your journey sends to the next generation?
I'm hopefully they can watch me on TV and I can be a great role model for all the girls and boys all around the world to, you know, follow your dreams, and that you can do it. Like anybody can do it. So as long as you stick to your plan and stick to what you love, then I think you're always going to be doing the right thing.
The people around you say you're one of the hardest workers they've ever seen. This has not been an accident. Now, you've just won the largest prize purse in women's golf history. How significant was this for the women's game, Minjee?
You know, we're always only going in the right direction. I mean, just the prize purse money going up is only a small bit of that. So I think we're just aiming for higher and higher each time. And just for the USGA and the US Open to, you know, step up and start that, I think it's just a big step in the right direction. And there's only other events that are going to follow. So I think it's just a great thing for women's game and the LPGA.
While I have you, a pro golfer here with us, we had a big shakeup in the golf world this week. Big names like Dustin Johnson resigning from the PGA Tour to pursue this highly lucrative new LIV Golf Tour. How much of an impact do you think this new league could have in the world of golf?
I don't really know too much about that. You know, obviously it's been a little bit controversial. I haven't really been following what has been going on, but you know, I guess it's just perspective on sort of where you are at in your life right now.
Yeah, and I understand. As a former pro athlete, I know you're so locked into what you do. You don't care what goes on around the sports world. We are so thankful that you took the time to join us. It was wonderful seeing you celebrating your second major title there at the U.S. Women's Open Championship, holding that trophy. Incredible stuff. We'll be following your career. We wish you the best of luck in the next major soon to come.
Thank you.
All right, now moving to 15-year-old Kamila Valieva. When she took the ice to the Beijing Olympics in the midst of a doping scandal, it was described as one of the darkest days in Olympic history. Well, a landmark new ruling has been passed trying to prevent this sort of thing in the future. We've got that and more coming up.
Islamic art, particularly geometry, is utterly fascinating to me. It's so old, but yet so complex. I grew up in Abu Dhabi. From an inspirational perspective, the Grand Mosque is just this marvelous, serene space. They use a lot of the floral motifs, and it's influenced my work. The type of art I make is predominantly made with paper and very fine layers of wood. So it's the structures, the patterns, the level of detail. When you repeat and you create symmetry, it becomes really beautiful. It's always about like this journey of discovery of like, well, what could I do with that and what's possible?
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?